Okay, I am super excited for today. Super excited. I haven't seen this man in a long time. Um, he had much shorter hair the last time I saw him.
Like this, something like
Yeah,
that.
man, I think you look great, man. I think you look
Thanks,
awesome.
man. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
If I could grow my hair out like that, brother, trust me, I would. All right,
Right on.
I'm gonna introduce you to. This is Jose Luis Garcia Gutierrez III, affectionately known as Joey to his friends. Born in Hale Center, Texas, joined the Army at age 19 as a tank crewman, which was a great choice. You did 17 years in the Army, deployed 3 times to Iraq, the initial invasion, OAF 3, which is '05 to '06, and then 2010 to 2011. You also deployed to Thailand, the Philippines, South Korea.
Mhm.
After, once you left the Army, you pursued your education at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu, where you studied anthropology and sociology. And then you completed your master's degree at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where in anthropology. You did your thesis in Mexico, which you're in Mexico right now, right?
Yeah, Roger. Vlad Carmen.
What part of Mexico is that?
The what are we in? We're in the Yucatan, I think, or Quintana Roo, on the Caribbean side, on the bottom side of like the other side where the impact crater is.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. The impact that took out the dinosaurs.
That one, Roger. I'm on the other side of that.
Yep. All right. So you went to Mexico and you studied syncretism. That's what you did your master's thesis on. Uh, but currently you own a handyman service. You have 2 trademarks. You market and print your own T-shirts, and you're working on a project currently where you're going to bring folks to Mexico and help them on a spiritual journey for spiritual enlightenment, spiritual awakening. And I can't wait to talk about that. That'll be later, but we're definitely going to cover that. Uh, let's start with your master's thesis. And I want to start with that because Stephen McGee, a mutual friend of ours,
Hmm.
he he told me he read your thesis a while back, and he was like, "It is freaking amazing." Uh, I don't know anything about syncretism, so bring me up to speed on that, what that is, and what your thesis was about.
Okay, Roger. So what syncretism is, the academic term is whenever you mesh two religions together and it once combined, then they create a new religion. Okay. And so when I was doing my research, in anthropology, one of the things I kind of always heard come up was how the uh, the pre-Hispanic religion in Mexico was dead. It was the word that I remember hearing being used in the academic world was it's a myth. It went away. And well, my family's from Mexico. I was firstborn generation there, so that was counter to what I had experienced growing up and as a child and what I'd seen. So what I wanted to do was come back and understand, like, whenever you see in Mexico City, when you go down to the Zocalo and from the old ruins, you see the guys out there in their regalia doing their dancing, and they do the blessings and stuff like that, the limpias, right? And so what I wanted to ask was, how did that survive if that was supposedly wiped out when Catholicism had come in? That's what kind of like where it came from. Like, how does that still exist if Catholicism came in the way it did? And then I started thinking about what I saw in the church and what I heard as a kid growing up. And I was like, and all the stuff that I heard growing up in the church when they spoke in a religious sense was really more indigenous in design than it was something of a European based like Catholicism, something to that effect. Right. So that's where the idea came from. When I got back home to Texas after my stint there in Hawaii, I came home to Mexico came back here to meet up with family to kind of get more to be more in touch with my roots and understand more of where I come from. After being in the army and going to school in Hawaii, one of the things that I kind of learned was um, I didn't think it was a coincidence how my life turned out, first and foremost. And so I wanted to come home and find out if that is in fact what happened. then how did that happen? And that led me down this trail that we're talking about now into syncretism. You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
yeah. So, to give you an example, what I found out when I came down here, and this one I'm gonna kind of, I'm sorry if it's kind of jumbly, but I'll do my best to kind of keep it into its own little areas. But for my study, I went on this pilgrimage into a place called Chalma. Okay, Chalma will come up later on when you and I are talking about that. Essentially, it'll be like a retreat for veterans. This place Chalma I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
So when I was in Chalma, when I was there, there's an effigy of what we would call the Virgin Mary, or as they call it here, La Virgen de Guadalupe. And
Right.
so when I saw that, that kind of played perfectly into my question that I'd asked, my academic question. If this is indigenous centric, how is there an effigy here of Catholicism, right? And so um, what I found out was, for first and foremost, La Virgen de Guadalupe. You should know this because a lot of your Mexican friends that they had, like me and my buddies, we either had a shirt, we had a tattoo, we had the little bandanas. We would deploy. I had my bandana. It was half Mexico flag, half American flag with La Virgen there in the middle, right? Well, the first thing I found out was that is not uh, like Mexican in design, nor it's not from here. It was brought here. La Virgen de Guadalupe. So
Okay.
let me start there first. So where La Virgen de Guadalupe originates from is before the Spaniards arrived here in the Americas, they were fighting another war in their own country where the Moors from Northern Africa had invaded their country, and they were fighting to get them out so they could reestablish what would later be known as the Spanish Kingdom. Well, in one of the areas that they had a battle, its name was Wadi Lebe. You and I know this, and a lot of our the people in the audience will know this, but Wadi is like a draw where water runs through. So Wadi Lebe, from the source that I used, means Wolf River. Well, as the Spaniards were trying to reconquer this area, and they don't speak that language, it turned into from Wadi Lebe to Guadalupe, right? And so what happened apparently in this area was a farmer found an effigy of one of the Madonnas of Catholicism, something of the Virgin Mary, but it was located there in that area. So because the Spaniards had this engagement, and when they won this decisive engagement to take back this area, well, then it was kind of saying, well, this area now is going to be claimed for La Virgen de Guadalupe. So the Virgin of Guadalupe. So essentially what happened, because of the victory, La Virgen de Guadalupe became a sign of war, kind of leading the troops, leading the columns, right? Because in that time, you understand this as a combat leader, you have to find something to motivate your soldiers to make sure that they're motivated to continue the mission at all costs. So in this case, it was, we won solely because La Virgen de Guadalupe put her hand here. And so because of that, we're going to carry this now as our standard. Okay. So when Christopher Columbus came over in 1492, in the front of his ship, he had a standard of La Virgen de Guadalupe, because that was what was going to guide him through the straits.
Okay.
Well, later on in 1519, when Hernán Cortés lands in Veracruz, in the front of his column, he has La Virgen de Guadalupe in the front of his column, right? So through the history of Mexico, through the colonial era, as this time is happening, as they're converting the natives into Catholicism, well, now I'm going to stop here for a little bit and kind of shift over to the native side, because we're talking about the Spanish side. So on the native side, they had an area called Tepeyac. Tepe is mountain, Yaac is nose. So it's the mountain that looks like a nose, Tepeyac. And they would go to this Tepeyac, and they would go and give their offerings there to the mother goddess. Their mother goddess, like what Mary is to the Catholics, her name was Cihuatcoatl, Cihuat being woman, Coat snake. And then later on, the Mexica, aka the Aztecs, would have a name for her that was Coatlicue, which is the lady in the snake dress, right? And if you ever go to the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, which I highly recommend to anybody. You'll see an effigy, big effigy, and there's a statue of a snake with two heads in two different directions. And it's like, I think there's a heart in the middle. I'll send you a picture. Maybe you can post it with your stuff. But that is Coatlicue. That is the mother goddess for the natives that were here. So they would go to this place and they would put their offerings. They would have their ceremonies there. So then what happens is, as these two worlds start to converge, now there's a story when it comes to La Virgen de Guadalupe of a character named Juan Diego. This is getting really into the Catholic religion. Some may not know it, but so this young fellow named Juan Diego, I can't remember his actual Native American name, is a Mexica name, but he runs off and he tells the Spaniards, the Franciscan priests, hey, I was approached by a woman up here, a female. She was a holy person. You know, he used the Virgin Mary. I think if I remember correctly, he uses the Virgin Mary. Well, the Franciscan friars are like, we don't believe you saw the Virgin Mary. And this young kid saying, no, I saw her. He goes, well, tell you what, go back to where you came from and bring us something to show us that you did in fact. So whenever he came back, he had some flowers. And when these flowers fell, there's what they wore in those days. It's kind of like, I guess if you're to think of like the Greek times, like a toga, they would wear it here on the side. They could wear it in the front, kind of like look at the cake. You know, you understand that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So he put his flowers there in the middle. He shows back up to the Franciscan friar, and when he drops it, there is the image that we all know, even yourself, of La Virgen de Guadalupe, where she stands there as such.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So
seen that image many times.
Okay, so that's where that came from. As he drops his tilma, it's got a tilma. And I'm sorry for the audience, but some of the words I'll be using is Spanish, and some of the words I'll be using is Nahuatl, because that's just how the story goes. Because it's mixed with the both, right? And so that right there is an example of the two worlds coming together. Because this young man went to Tepeyac, where they had their offerings at anyway, takes it to the Franciscan friars. And so whenever he drops his tilma and they see the image of La Virgen de Guadalupe, or the Virgin Mary as they know it, then they go, fine. Then what we need to do is we need to move to this point, and we needed to put a shrine there so that we can kind of conserve it, protect it from anything else. And if you go to present day Mexico City, that is what they call La Basilica de Guadalupe.
That's fascinating. That's really wild, man.
Right. And so it goes a little bit deeper into this too, about where I was at when I saw this. So when I saw this in this place called Chalma, I asked the question later on to a friend of mine who's from Puebla. His family comes from curanderos. Those are like the natural healers, the native healers. He's a native speaker of the language. So whenever you translate it, you lose little pieces. So because he can speak the language, he told me a story way more different. That was a lot more deeper. So the reason why there was an effigy of La Virgen de Guadalupe, aka the Mother Goddess, aka the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus Christ, is because in Chalma they have these caves. And when you go to these caves and you go inside the caves to leave your offering, what happens is, the point is you do your offering, you do your ceremony, and when you leave the cave, and to think about it, while you're in the cave, it's dark, you can't really see anything, and your mind plays tricks on you, see all these things. This is supposed to represent the divinity in your head prior to you being born. So that the last part of this pilgrimage that we went on was when you leave the cave, you're reborn. So the cave represents a place for your mother goddess, of the mother goddess. So you go there to be reborn from the mother goddess, the earth goddess. But if you're not
like a womb,
yes,
like the cave
absolutely.
Is okay, Roger.
So if you are a follower of the older traditional ways, then to you, yes, it would be, I'm going into the cave to be reborn. If you were to be more of a traditional Catholic, you could still go that same route, because to you, the effigy is La Virgen de Guadalupe, aka the Virgin Mary. So you would still be going to the Mother Goddess and asking some sort of giving some sort of offering to ask for a rebirth, if you will, right? And then the final part of this to make all this stuff cool is this was really funny to me is I started noticing this in a lot of the uh, about the well right now in the current era we have this issue going on in the genders and the sexes where there's women feel that they're being oppressed by the men are being oppressed by the women. It's back and forth. Well, to make everybody happy, using the image of La Virgen de Guadalupe, if you look behind her, there's an aura back there. Now remember that she's supposed to be a female, a female deity, which is good for the females and nothing for the males. However, for both, that is actually what they call in the Nahuatl language a teocuitla. Teo is something spirit. It means spirit. Cuitla means something that you give out, like a holy, like a presence that you give out. What the Hawaiians, if you ever stationed Hawaii, what they call the mana. It's like that's inside of you. Right. And so she's releasing her mana to the world, and that makes her also that gives her masculine aspects, which means that kind of fulfills that story for me, especially when I went there. It's like, oh, it makes sense now. You go to the caves, you pray to the Mother Goddess, you pray to the Virgin Mary, and then when you come back out, well, you're reborn, and as a man, you're like, yeah, and she's kind of, so there's a lot of cool stuff that I learned in that thing with syncretism, to where this kind of like a whirlwind. It kind of does this, and then it kind of eats itself and reinvents it. So, but that's an example that I found out in that syncretism.
That is fascinating stuff. That is awesome. And I want to go to that cave. I feel like I want to be reborn. I want to do that.
We'll talk about that later whenever we get into that part. When we talk about that spiritual stuff that I'm talking about, we'll get into that because it goes. I'll get a lot more deeper about what that cave means.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. It's fascinating. It's not just Catholicism. It's not just indigenous native religions out of Central America, even deeper. I mean, I'm sure archaeologists have dug up small effigies of, the Earth Mother that has gone back tens of thousands of years.
Right.
In some way, shape, or form, humans have been worshiping this image of a mother goddess for eons. And what we're looking at now is like the latest incarnation. And what you're studying, or what you studied, was that blending. That's fascinating. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I hope you got an A on the thesis.
Man, I'll tell you what, man. So when I went to school back in the day, we had exam 5, and you had to go in there in exam 5, and you had to go in there and swing for the fences, right? Well,
yes,
they told me that, hey, you got to defend your thesis, and I was expecting a 3 or 4 hour, like just a complete drilling, and it ended up turning into where I went in there and briefed my thesis on a slideshow. I mean, we're talking standard Army, what you learned in gun school kind of stuff. And my exam, I went in there and I pitched it like exam 5, and I'm not bragging or blowing smoke up my own ass, but when I went and had beers afterwards with the professors, one of them told me, goes, hey, I'm just going to say, man, I've never heard anybody give a brief like that. And I was just kind of thinking in my head, like, exam 5, baby.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that is awesome. I'm glad you took something away from Master Gunner School. if for folks that's where I initially met you. Probably 2008, 2009. When did you come through Master Gunner School?
2008.
2008. All right, man. I'd been an instructor there for a couple of years at that point. I remember when you came in, especially myself and McGee, we were blown away with your drive, dude. And from that, I mean, there are guys that come there and they want to pass that school. And for people who don't know, Master Gunner School is probably, at least academically, the most challenging school that we as tankers will ever attend. And it is a very high standard to pass. You have to get a 90% on written exams, 100% on hands-on, and there's no wiggle room. And we don't cut slack because you're our buddy. We earned it, so we expect you to earn it. And dude, you would stay late. you were always there for extra refresher training. You wanted it, and it was obvious you wanted it. And if every student came in with that level of drive like you had, nobody would fail that course. Um, but they just don't. But I've followed you for years since then, and I've heard about and watched and seen all of these accomplishments that you have. You are a very driven guy. I mean, if I could bottle the drive that you have in your soul and take a sip of that every morning, I'd be I'd be an amazing person, my damn self. You you're a pretty impressive guy. Um, let's go back to childhood growing up in Texas. You said you're first generation American. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yeah.
All right. So what was your childhood like?
Man, it was pretty cool, dude. Like, both of my parents are from Mexico, and they're on like from the opposite sides. My mom's from the right there, the border in Texas, Tamaulipas, and my dad's on the other side in Michoacan. So they're like two like different sides. So I got to grow up in this really cool world where, you got Tamaulipas, Veracruz mixed with Michoacan. So it was really fun. Um, uh, Well, like I said, both my parents are from Mexico, so we did a lot of stuff like outdoorsy because that's what they did growing up. Got to spend a lot of time with family. We'd come to Mexico and hang out with my great grandmother when she was still alive. Um, a lot of camping, hunting with my dad, um, and then like with my friends in high school, I played sports some, but not really much. I really wasn't a sporty guy. Really big in the FFA, the Future Farmers in America. Whoop, whoop.
I was FFA also.
Yeah, man. And I did that. And oh yeah, fun fact. I was on the debate team too in high school, man. Just fun facts. Talking about exam 5.
That's
Mm-hmm.
good.
Right.
That's awesome.
But
I was just
not.
having a conversation
Uh-huh.
with my mother this weekend that like whatever happened to debate, in high school. Um, if it still exists, good. If it doesn't, it needs to come back. That's
I
a
agree.
great skill. It's a great skill to have.
Yeah.
Do
And
you
they
go ahead, brother?
I was saying they have two types. When I was there, they had like the cross examination, which was like the Lincoln Douglas, where you have like two real long back to back, kind of like some Ralph Waldo Emerson, have some essay stuff. And then you had the other
Wow.
one that I did which was the cross examination, which was like you could come up and pitch like your thesis, then I would come back and argue it, then you would come back with facts, and then I would come back with a counter fact. And that's the one that I did, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Man, a debate between about Lincoln and Davis. That Who would want to take Davis's side on that? That's crazy. Oh well. Hey,
Yeah.
so you mentioned in your write up that you at some point you moved and lived in the area that was known as Comanche territory, and you were born in or lived in the same county where Quanah Parker was.
Yeah. So
And, and
I was born up north in this little town called Seminole. If you know where Lubbock, Texas, I mean, I'm sorry, Hell Center. If you know where Lubbock is, I was born north of that. But then
yeah, I know where.
we moved south of Lubbock between Lubbock and Odessa, closer to the New Mexico border, a town called Seminole in Gaines County in Texas. And that's where out there in the middle of nowhere is a place where there's a bunch of cedar called Cedar Point, and there's a fresh spring, and that is where they say Quanah Parker was born.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's wild. For folks that don't know, Quanah Parker was the son of a Comanche chief and a white woman. Was her name Sarah Parker?
Cynthia Ann Parker.
Cynthia Ann Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got a fascinating story. She was abducted in a raid and never wanted to go back to white culture. She chose to stay with the Comanche.
Yep.
And then her son would go on to be chief himself,
Mm-hmm.
which fascinating stuff. That's
Right.
just I read what was that? What's that book?
Empire of the Summer Moon.
That one. That
Awesome.
is such a
Yeah.
that is such a good book. Yeah, fascinating. So, what were your grades like in school?
Ooh, man. Yeah, man. Depending on the subject, really. I wasn't a real big fan of like numbers or science, but I mean, if it came to like literature, writing, history, stuff like that, I think I failed Spanish too.
What?
Because my mom, my mom's a retired Spanish teacher, but she spoke that Castellano, real, very flamboyant, strict Spanish. Where my dad comes from in the mountains of Michoacan, they speak like this mix of like the Spanish with like the native language over there. So, and it's like they're almost like they're singing. And that one sounded cooler to me than the other one. So when it came time to speak Spanish, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to talk like them. I'm going to talk like them. That was, you get a D with them or you get an A. I was like, I'll take the D. D for diploma, man. I'm good.
That's awesome. That's like trying to pass an English class when you're speaking Creole version of
Roger.
English.
Roger. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned you initially went to college right out of high school before the Army. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? Why'd you decide it's not for me right now, or what happened?
Well, I had originally wanted to go, and I'm sure this is a story for a lot of people that we know, but like I had originally wanted to go, but my dad, he grew up during the Vietnam, like, so he wasn't a citizen, so he can't go to the fight, but he grew up during the Vietnam, and so did my mom, actually. Actually, I had an uncle on my mom's side that did go to Vietnam, and I believe that, that he went. But anyway, they both kind of saw like the environment, the how would you say what was going on in the country during Vietnam War, after the war. So they were kind of like, tell you what, do us a favor, go try out college first, because I'd wanted to join the Army beforehand. But they had told me, go try out college, see what it's like, give it a year, and if you don't like it, then everything is cool. And I went to college, and I think it was in my first semester, to be fair. I was sitting there in an apartment with one of my buddies. I moved into an apartment with him, and we were sitting there drinking beer, really not doing anything. And I saw a commercial where a tank jumps over, and I was like, I'm going to call the Army guy. I was like, because this college thing isn't really, I don't, it was going, it just, so I don't sound like anything crazy, but it just was not fulfilling for me. And when I saw the tank jump over the berm, I was like, I think I could see myself being in that tank jumping the berm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the same commercial that got me too.
Yeah.
It's like, that
Yeah.
looks awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So tanking was like, that was your choice. That's what you were going to do. Of course, we know you went to basic training, Fort Knox. Back
Yeah.
then, that's where everybody went to basic training. What was your first duty station?
Fort Knox, man. Fort Knox.
You were
Ready, Echo Troop 116 Cav, the same Echo Troop 116 Cav to send me to Master Gunner School with you. Exactly. Yep. To a dot.
So you're already familiar with the branch, the Master Gunner branch, because you're bringing us our tanks and everything.
First Sergeant Galloway was one of our platoon sergeants, so I knew him. My platoon sergeant was a guy, Kevin Pareto. He was a Big Red One guy. Sergeant DePersis, a Big Red One guy. These are like old school Master Gunners. They were instructors, but those are the guys when I was a little, shit-eating private out there, doing what I was doing. They were either my platoon sergeants or in my troop. So
good. So you had a lot of good positive influence from solid tankers that maybe helped motivate you to get to Master Gunner School someday.
So can I tell you a story right quick, man? So this is like honest to God truth. So at Fort Knox, they started getting really big. We had a first sergeant, Dave Rennicker was his name. Cool dude, man, big time bow hunter, and he got really big into kind of instead of it being like a trade-off and doing trade-off stuff, he goes, let's make this more like the line units where you're doing line stuff, and when time to do trade-off, we'll do trade-off. And so we started having sergeant's time training, like wake up early, go eat chow, so you could start doing sergeant's time training all day till half day. Then you cut us out early, and it was really cool. And Sergeant Pareto, he was my platoon sergeant, Kevin Pareto. And one day I remember he goes, hey, we're going to go to Master Gunner branch and we're going to have a class on gun tube technology. It's like, all right, cool. And all I remember is we went through there and we were just like, I remember being like a kid in a toy store. And I'm over there playing with the cannon, the one that's cut in half. And then we're seeing the breach and we're all like little kids like, ooh. And then he's like, okay, we went to the very back of the shop where we had the maintenance base. We went to the very back and he set up a bay back there. And all I can remember is telling you this, bro, is he turned around. He had somebody clicking the little computer for him. He turned around with his little Master Gunner, I'm a cool guy, Master Gunner stick, I'm a cool guy. And he started spitting out. He goes, Hey man, welcome today. My name is Sergeant First Class Pareto. Today we're going to talk about gun tube technology. Slide. And then he started boom, 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 boom. And I was sitting back there as nine, maybe 21, maybe. And I was sitting back there and my mind was like blown. So I was like, you shit. He said everything on those things. And I mean, and I promise, like, I'm not lying
Did
to
he
you. Huh?
did he used to teach gun tube tech
He was
at
an,
Mike at the break?
yeah.
Okay.
So let me tell you
Okay.
about that troop I was in, bro. So we were stacked heavy. We had one, two, back in those days, we had four platoons in each troop. But I want to say that every one of those platoon sergeants before I left Fort Knox was a master gunner instructor. So I remember Galloway, Pareto, and the Persis, and I think there was another one, but they were all four master gunner instructors. So I grew up in this world of like, there was no bullshit. It was like nothing. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's funny because so you mentioned TRADOC, and for folks that don't know, TRADOC means training command. That's where soldiers go to school, and if you are assigned there as like a young private like yourself, your job really is just kind of providing materials and resources and equipment for the people that are actually there to train. Um, I'm really glad to hear that you had platoon sergeants there that were taking time out to train you the same way that folks that are on in what's called a line unit, which are the deployable units,
Mhm.
um, that they were keeping your skills sharpened. So when you did go to a line unit, you're not like some people come from Fort Knox from being stationed there, and they get into a line unit and they're clueless. They're not ready.
Right.
They don't know anything. They could have 4 years in the army, but they've never been in a line unit, and they're kind of behind the curve.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you had people there that were keeping you guys sharp. And the idea of each one of those platoon sergeants being a master gunner, that's almost unheard of. Typically, a company only has one, maybe
Mhm.
two master gunners. The fact that you had four in a troop, that's that's fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I remember
So
that. I remember that real quick. I remember that after that, and that was the one lesson I carried with me. So with my crew, I would sit there on the boy evacuator, and I would show them the exact. I mean, of course, in those days I was a master gunner, but from what I remembered, it was everything about the stages of the breach, locking in the round, it firing, the gases escaping, the boy evacuator, the blast envelope. I mean, all that I remembered, and I remember prior to having the title. I would teach that to my crews just to kind of get them, because I remember as a young soldier, I think maybe a specialist, that changed everything and how I viewed tanking, everything.
yeah, I can remember also as a young tank soldier whenever I was around a master gunner and they were talking, which seemed like a totally different language to me. They just knew things about the tank that I'm like, I want to be one of those guys because they are the real subject matter experts. Uh, yeah, it's very inspiring to be around a Mike Goff. It's just
Yeah.
like, wow, you know a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you leave Knox. Let's talk about what year did you come in?
Uh, or I graduated basic training 99, the April 99.
Okay, so you do your first couple of years at Knox, and then
Mhm.
I am assuming you get stationed with who did you go to Iraq with?
So after Fort Knox, I went to Korea for a year in the second tank. I was in second tank. And then they sent me from there, I went to Fort Hood, 4th Infantry Division, 1st Brigade.
Okay, when did you leave Korea?
Uh, '02, October of
Okay,
'02, because
I
that's not that really cool little month and a half break. I think on your way back from Korea before you went to Fort Hood, they sent you to the transition course from the A1 to the set.
oh, perfect.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the year you left Korea is because I was in first tank, but I was there probably right after you left.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have seen each other. I loved Korea. Korea was awesome.
Great
But
times.
all right, let's talk about the invasion then. If I remember, so you're in fourth ID. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember, fourth ID was supposed to come in from the north through Turkey. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So what ended up happening with you guys? Because I know Turkey ended up saying no, we're not going to let a division move through Turkey into Iraq.
Yeah. Um, well, we went and we got to Kuwait. we went in through Kuwait like everybody else, and I don't remember the actual date. I'd say that we got there probably end of May, beginning of, I mean, end of March, beginning of April. And then we were there for like 2 weeks. And then one day they told us to line up and we got on head to start to push north, you know.
Okay, so you guys weren't on the initial push.
No,
You guys were kind of like follow up
Roger. Yeah. Well, I guess once they
behind.
secured Biop and all that area was secured and whatnot, then they pushed us up north. We ended up going to Beji, which was north of Tikrit, Camp Lancer.
Okay, what was it like up there? That first year of the war, what was that like for you?
We took over an airfield, and so it was kind of cool, man. It was like an airfield. If I remember correctly, around that airfield to the north of it more was a big old ammo dump, and I think originally we were supposed to go in there and destroy it, but then with time they were going to use that ammunition to go back to the Iraqis. I really don't know what that stuff, but there wasn't a lot up there. It was up there, and it was just we were like on the northern edge of our brigade up there, and yeah, we just did a lot of patrolling up there. Not a lot of happened, you know. There towards the middle, that's when we started getting mortared, and I mean, it wasn't for me. My first tour up there wasn't bad at
Okay.
all.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't super intense then.
I mean, there was stuff that went on. There was IEDs, there was mortars. Some of the guys got into gunfights, but me personally, no. You know, I was on the I first my first tank, I moved to the commander's gunner. I was the commander's gunner for a little bit. And then from there, went over to HHC and I started rolling with the scouts and doing stuff with their arms room. But that I can recall, no. But there were some dudes in my battalion up there in 366 that did get into some gunfights. But that I saw nothing crazy.
Okay. So what were any of the three tours that you went on? Like the OIF3, that's the first time I went there. It was 2005, 2006, and that was
Yeah,
arguably the bloodiest year. That's when the insurgency was like full tilt.
check.
Did you
Roger.
did you go back in 2005? Did you go back with Fourth ID again?
Hmm.
Okay. Were you in Baghdad at that point or no?
Southern Baghdad. We were operating out of we initially got to what was it out there? Camp Striker. We were at Camp Striker initially.
Yep.
And then we
You,
pushed out. If you ever heard that place called you remember what it was called? It was out there by the Euphrates, I believe, or I think that was out there southwest, but it was called the Russian power plant. You remember that?
yeah. Hmm.
Well, up from there was like a water plant that we took over. That's what we ran. And I was gonna say, yeah, my first one was like, saw some stuff, but nothing crazy. But the second time I went over there, I was kind of crossing lines with some of my buddies. And I tell this to everybody that when I tell stories, it's the exact same one. Because they'll say, like, well, how was it? It's like, oh man, first one was like, hey man, cool. We went to the war, we made it back, everything's chill. Went back to the war. This time I'm a tank commander and I see you. I'm like, yo, what's up, Jeremy? What's up, Mike Golf? How's life? And you just kind of, and I forget my buddy's name, but I just remember the one I saw, he was trained and he just looked at me and goes, hey, G, get ready. These dudes came to fight this time. And I was like, uh-oh. And they kind of like,
Yeah.
I remember I kind of, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Cause I was like, if that's dude told, and that means you understand this in the army, we meet people, some people are, but this dude, I knew him and he was like people of my people. And he was like, get ready. This shit's real. And I was like, uh-oh. So the
Yeah.
second time over for me was the one for me is when I kind of, I guess you can say I kind of earned my stripes.
Yeah. I think if during the invasion, if you're in 3rd Infantry Division, you saw a lot of action.
Check.
Um, the unit I was in, I went in OIF3 2005 with 3rd ACR, and when I deployed with about half the guys had already been in the first tour, like yourself, and they didn't see much action at all. I think a couple of gunfights, maybe an IED. I think their commander, the troop commander, had lost his foot to an IED, but nothing super crazy. And so they were all kind of looking at Iraq like this is going to be a walk in the park, guys. It's nothing to worry about. And I'd been watching the news, and I'm like, I don't think so, man. I think shit's firing up over there. And we get there, and holy crap, man! Yeah, it was like, welcome to the show, boys. This is not OIF1 anymore.
Roger that.
I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, you guys were right beside us. Fourth ID you guys were our adjacent unit. We were just to your west, between the rivers. Um, it got bad.
Yeah.
It got pretty freaking bad. What are there some memorable, like really bad days for you that you recall from that tour?
Um, the one for me that sticks out, man, is I got really, I mean, I am as a leader, as a combat veteran, I was very lucky. I didn't really lose a lot of friends in combat. Normally it came afterwards. But the one story that sticks out for me is we lost a truck. It was a catastrophic kill. And I was the platoon sergeant's wingman, and my platoon sergeant, Lionel McCollum, he was also a master gunner. So going back to that master gunner thing, I was just kind of right there in the like on the belt loop of a master gunner. And all I remember
Yeah.
is I was like his right hand man. He just kind of told me, goes, get all the guys and take them get them back in the tent. And it was like, okay. So we went back, and then he came in and told us, we had a catastrophic kill. Everybody, I'll go get the names. Came back, gave the names. It was a new lieutenant and some guys that were new. They were new first timers. Bunch of our soldiers in the platoon had gone to basic training with them. And once the names came out, you could just see the emotion. Guys are, I knew them. Um, and unfortunately, I knew them, but I didn't know them like the others. They were the young kids, right? Maybe another tour would have been, but I just remember that was kind of like, oh. And then later on, we all went back, my platoon, we went back, and we went from Mamudia. We were in Mamudia at the time. We went back up to Biop, back up to Striker, I think Liberty, something like that, to go do the memorial. Now, I remember that right there really stuck with me to get back. I want to kind of, you talked about earlier. For me, when we went back to the company, you see all your homeboys. Hey, what's up, Jeremy? What's up? And it's a joyful time. And you're kind of like, when you leave, that's the somber moment. You're like, hey, we're going to go now. You be cool. I'm going to be cool. And at the end of all this, we'll go drink a beer, whatever.
Yeah.
And well, I remember walking into that memorial and just seeing everybody and just feeling that aura in there. And afterwards, my gunner, he was a cool cat. I went and looked for him, and he was just in there smoking a cigarette, real calm and collective. And I wanted to make sure that my crew was okay, like no vigilante stuff. And I was like, "Hey, man, are you cool, man? Are you cool?" And I just remember he told me, he goes, "No, but somebody has to pay for this." And I was like, "All right, well, just make sure you're cool." And what stuck out to me was we were done, and we were going back to Mamudia, and we were leaving those gates of Bayat, getting out there on MSR1. We were heading south, and I just remember I was at the end of the column, looking at those four tanks going down the road. I'm like, man, you better hope that nothing bad happens along this way. You better hope that nobody gets froggy and decides to jump, because you're going to have four tanks that are pissed off, and that's going to be a really bad day, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I know.
that one right there, that's the more, I guess you say, the sad one that I remember. The more exciting one is whenever they hit my platoon sergeant with an IED, and I got to use a canister round. That was fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you actually got to use the main gun. I never fired my main gun a single daggone time in Iraq. Not
Yeah.
a single time.
Yeah.
Did did you get him?
I did. Yeah.
Good.
So what we did was, I don't want to get into all the thing, because the Tim Kennedy thing just came out, and I'm like, oh, but all I,
Oh,
like, you know what I'm saying, right? Because everyone's gonna start like, hey, man, I was there too, bro. Like, so, but what I do remember
yeah,
is
yeah.
I just
Ted Kennedy, he's on fire right now because he's been telling a lot of war stories that are not his war
yeah,
stories,
yeah.
and,
So
and people are calling him out on it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I can tell you at the end of the story, there were no medals. It was just a bunch of dudes afterwards. Like, that's what you did. We're messing with our buddy. We're gonna go back and smoke cigarettes and drink Ripper's because we're cool tankers from Fort Hood.
Yeah.
But what I remember, real the quick short, is we were behind my platoon sergeant this time for some reason. He got hit, and I could see the white like stream of smoke. And I told my gunner, follow the smoke, and he did, and we followed it, and sure enough, there they were. And we popped off one of those can rounds. I remember the trees that were in front of us fell, and my first thought was, man, that wasn't loud. I was expecting something louder from the can round, but it was. But we engaged with small arms, and after that we dispatched those people. We went forward, helped my platoon sergeant, turned around, went back home, and I want to say that was our last time to go out. I think after that we were kind of like, we're done. We're gonna go home.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the vigilantism that people get in their heart,
Hmm.
especially in the kind of fight that we were in where we're losing guys and we're not getting a lot of payback. It kind of feels like we're fighting ghosts,
Roger.
right?
Hmm.
Uh, I hate to say this, but my tank platoon, we had a plan. We sat down, it was the tank commanders and the platoon leader. And there was this particular village that we used to get hit there all the time. And we would never have anybody to engage. You can't, our ROE was so strict that you had to see a guy like literally setting off an ID or shooting at you before you could
Hmm.
start shooting at. And, we never had that opportunity. We'd get hit and they're ghosts. They'd disappear immediately. They didn't want to stand and fight a tank. Um, but we had this plan because this village, they were using pumps to pump water out of the Tigris River to irrigate their crops. And their livelihood was those crops, and their livelihood was that pump house that was pumping water into those canals. And we were going to go and just take that damn thing out and just say, fuck you guys, fuck you, starve. Like, and we were going to do it.
Hmm.
And we were talking about just the four of us, not even telling the privates or the specialists what we were doing. We're gonna get rid of this damn pump house, and we're gonna
Right.
screw these guys.
Right.
And that's the vigilantism that people start coming up with. And there's a lot of people that went to prison for killing people that wasn't
Yeah.
justified, but they're
Hmm.
pissed off and they're not getting payback. And it was a it was a rough year, man.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
it was tough.
that engagement that I told you about happened afterwards. So if there was any payback to get had, I mean, I remember I went through a few boxes of 50 cal. And my gunner got to pop up a main gun round and some 240. So, and at the end, when there was a BDA done, because we had to go talk to the full bird colonel and somebody else afterwards, because they're like, why are there tanks popping off rounds in our AO? In our AO, I was like, well, sir, you see what had happened was these dudes out there in the field thought they were gonna be cool in a bongo truck and attack the tank in front of me, which, unbeknownst to them, that's my senior NCO word of the day. We were behind them, and had itchy
Yours went.
fingers. We had itchy
Yeah.
fingers.
Yes. I would have. There was many days when I would have killed for a day like that, where you
Hmm.
could just throw some hate right back at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. So OIF three's done, and then you end up going to your third trip to Iraq. Well, between OIF 1, 3, and what was that one, like OIF 9 or something? I don't even know what that would have been
Actually,
called.
that's when they had redesignated to Operation New Dawn, because we were transitioning it over to the Iraqis. Yeah. And I went over there with
Oh,
Dragon Company, First Squadron. Sorry, as I was. What are we? Oh shit, I forgot where we were. I was in First Squadron, 1 3 ACR.
with with third ACR.
Yeah, I was in Dragon Company. I was in Dragon Company, one of the Dragon Company master gunners.
Did you guys have tanks still, or were you guys strikers at that point?
Yep. We were the last ones on tanks.
Oh, so you're still an ACR.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So where were you guys at that time?
Kalsul.
Where?
Kalsul?
Where is that?
Boy, don't get me to lie, dude. It's there's like the main MSR, and there's another road that goes this way, and we were there. It's in the southern part. It was south of Baghdad. I know that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never operated.
Kalsul. Yes, yeah, Kalsul. Yeah.
I think Mamadia was probably the farthest south that I ever got.
Okay.
Uh,
I've been there. I've been to Mahmoudiya.
yeah, Mamadia was kind of a shithole. That
Do you remember
was
that place out there? Do you remember that place they call the Highway of Death?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that whole gunfight took off at, because when we got there, we were attached to the 10th Mountain Division, to the Motown guys. And
Uh
at
huh.
that time, in 4th ID, we were a tank company attached to an a tank platoon attached to an infantry company. And we got there, remember, they had like this barbed wire, and there was like the Alamo. And they're like, yeah, man, this dude comes over, he goes, everything past this is Indian country. And I was like, right on. And we're going to get to the, I'm just kind of like, right on, I dig it. He's like, and because I come from the Comancheria, so I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that means. There's a lot of people back there that don't want you. And and then we're going to that the Russian power plant, and that's what we that's I yeah, that highway of death. We were there. We started clearing it. I was there. We cleared it to that place, man. It was. I'm talking like when they started clearing that thing, bro. It sounded like constantly you were hearing bombs going off. I'll just say it like that. It was constant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly. I've been on that road. Were you ever at Fobbs St. Michael in Mom? Does this ring a bell?
St. Michael. That's the one off the highway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we stayed at.
Or-
We were out there. We stayed at I think Fort St. Michael, and then we would travel into where that Alamo place was at, and we would do there until we started to push forward toward. We were actually with them to push forward into the Russian power plant.
Did you know Sergeant Major Matthews? No.
Matthews
Yeah, short guy. Fucking
was it,
awesome. Great.
was he the tanker from the third from the mountain guys, from the 10th mountain guys?
No, I thought he was. No, I'm going back. I'm thinking back OIF3. I thought he
Okay,
was with. I think he was with Fourth ID. I think he might have been First Armored Division actually.
okay.
So, never mind. Whatever. I thought maybe you might know him. Okay, so you did your time in Iraq. You did a lot of time in Iraq. Let me ask you this, brother. You said you 17 years. Why not 20?
My name came down on that QMP in 2015, whenever Obama and Biden were doing the cutbacks. So my name came down on that list right there. I talked to Valvano, Steve. He reached out to me. He's like, "Hey man, I saw your name," and he told me, help me put a packet together. But to be fair, man, at that time I was kind of like already done. I was already
Yeah.
done. I was. I'm glad it happened the way it did. I mean, I know everybody tells me you're stupid. 20 years. I know I got it, but I still have 17 years federal service time. Got to start it back up, pay into it, whatever. But
Okay.
I put in my packet. I did everything that needed to be done. Um, and they still were like, "Hey, man, sorry you didn't make the cut." And rather than, you know, ask for forgive, do all these rebuttals they have, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to do just like I said I was going to do. Just like in jujitsu, I bowed out. So thank you. Grabbed my stuff, left."
God, the Army, man. We're just a number.
Mhm.
It's like that was a scary time to be in the Army. I tell people about that, during the sequestration years, that when
Yeah,
Obama was, we're in the middle of two effing wars, and they decide to cut 75,000 US soldiers
yeah,
off the book.
yeah,
And it's like, what are you doing?
yeah. And a lot
We
of us
lost a lot.
were, and a lot of us that I met in Hawaii when I was transitioning out, a lot of us were like at the 17-year mark. And then of course they were like, "Oh well, if you put in the special paperwork, you can ask them if you can stay in past the 17 to the 18, then you can retire." Like, well, that's why they're getting rid of us.
Yeah, they don't want to pay you
Yep.
retirement.
Right. Right. Right.
Oh, boy, that
Yeah.
whole era pissed me off.
Yeah.
That was such a screwed up time to be in the Army because,
Mhm.
I mean, you had to watch your ass. If you did anything wrong, you're gone.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. Absolutely. You know.
My God, that sucks, man. Well, I know things have been working out for you since then. So
Mhm.
let's talk post Army. Why anthropology? Why sociology?
So I actually got into the anthropology because I was doing I did a certificate in forensic anthropology because in Hawaii is where they have the DP DPAA, Department of Personnel Accountability Agency, who is charged with going to different countries and searching for the remains of the fallen. So that's why I got into it, and then the anthropology was attached to it. Um, while I was doing my internship for my forensics to complete my forensics, I'd already completed my anthropology requirements. But during the time of my forensics, um, the university came up to me and they told me like, "Hey, so I could get full BAH in Hawaii, which I think is like $3,300, I think. It's good for them, it's good for me. So they're like, we're gonna give you 3 additional classes to give you full time." And one of my professors told me, "Well, why don't you use that to go get another degree?" And just to be an asshole and go pick on those people, I went to sociology. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about locating fallen soldier remains?
So those guys I told you about, the catastrophic kill, a few of those fellows, they fit that category, say like that, because of the how extreme those explosions were. Um, what I wanted to do is go back, which I still in, it's still in the works, still could happen, but I want to eventually end up a forensic archaeologist so that I could go work for this department because I got 17 years federal service time. I'm a veteran, so that would play in well for me going and working for the government again. I already at one time held a clearance, so getting a new clearance would just be updating, updating my packet, and I felt that would be a great way to first and foremost fulfill my 20 years plus as a federal, in my time. And number two, well, I guess number two, to give back to the military community because I saw that happen to me. I was a part of that. And I remember when they told me, not to get too personal, but one of the individuals, more of him was recovered. So they had to go and, I forget the word for it, but re-exhume the body. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how terrible is that for the parents? But then I thought, but I would want to be the person on the other side who, not to say, hey, we're doing all this to bring him back because he was somebody I knew or somebody that somebody knew. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I did a funeral detail after we came back from OIF3,
Mhm.
and we we got the word that Master Sergeant West had been killed, and Master Sergeant West was the platoon sergeant for um, the guys that I had at my funeral detail. He had been their platoon sergeant in OIF1. They
Oh,
knew him
wow.
intimately,
Wow.
and we we got notified that he'd been killed in Iraq, and at that time, full service funeral details by the active duty army were only being performed for people that were fallen in Iraq or Afghanistan. Any retirees or veterans that passed, they got like a reservist 2-man detail. But I had a flag folding team. I had the pallbearers. I had the firing squad. I had the entire thing. And when the casualty guy notified me that it was Master Sergeant West that we were going to be picking up his remains in Denver Airport, they said, "Well, we understand that a lot of your guys on your detail know him very well." And they're like, "Clear it with those guys and make sure they're willing to do this." And of course, when you say, "Hey, it's Master Sergeant West. Do you guys want to do this detail or do we need to find somebody to replace you?" Everyone to a man, of course, was like, "Yes, we're going to do it. We're going to render honors for Sergeant West." But where I'm going with this story is when we got his casket, came off the plane at Denver International, and it was a very solemn occasion. They didn't let anybody get off the plane until he was off the plane. The whole terminal, you could look up into the terminal and you could see there was just a wall of people watching. And it was very solemn. And Master Sergeant West was a big man. He played college ball. He was probably 6'4". He was probably 200, a high 200s. And the pallbearers were all big dudes. And when they picked up that casket, they were expecting weight, and there was none. And when you talk about remains, what was left over from a lot of these guys in these catastrophic explosions was not much. And he had been reduced to a Ziploc baggie, and that was all they could find of him.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely that tore those guys up. And that's when the reality really set in for that team. They still did everything in a very professional manner, but my God, when I saw them lift that, and I expected them to, you know, have some resistance, and they had none. It was like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And it's awful, brother. And
Mhm.
yeah, so you're responsible for or a part of a team that found a World War II remains of a World War II
Yeah.
soldier. Is that
Yeah. So,
talk about?
yeah. So when I was still at West Oahu, one of my professors told me, he goes, "Hey man," he goes, there's a spot if you're interested, put your name in for it, with the University of Wisconsin out of Madison." Like, okay, yeah, and I did, and they're like, "Hey, you're good to go." So, hey, They flew me from Hawaii to Texas to hang out, and they flew me from Texas to Belgium. So that was cool. But we were so Bastogne, where Bastogne is located. If I remember correctly, we were southeast of there, out in the countryside. This little bed and breakfast. That's where we were staying at. And then from there, we went more into the countryside, and that's where we did our investigation. So I believe the date was December 13th, 1944, when this plane went down. It was a Marauder. I don't know the nomenclature, the actual, but it was a Marauder, I believe.
Okay.
But the gentleman was one of the gunners in one of the cockpits up top. He was one of the gunners up there. And what was interesting is the day that we got to the site, the very, very first day, I went out with the professors because I wanted to do a site recon. Remember those?
Yes.
Right? So let's go do a site recon. Got out there, kind of looked at the ground, what's going on. And then I noticed there was a bunch of ticks on me. Like, hey, cool, bring some spray for ticks. Next day I go back, I'm ready to clear ground, ready to fight ticks. I'm thinking like Army days, it's going to be shitty. And right when we start, we have to stop because these two gentlemen start walking up the hill. And this old man has a box with him. I'm not bullshitting. He has a box with him. Sits down in front of us, and I'm with the students, and the professors go forward, and he just starts crying. This old man starts crying. He goes, dude, I was a little boy. Where I live at over there, I saw the Germans shoot this plane down, man. And I mean, I'm good chicken skin talking, telling you the story, but I was sitting in the back because everybody's a college student. I'm like a soldier. And what are we talking about? War. And, Whiting's better at history than Garcia, but, he's not as good as this guy. But that's what we do, right? That's just, and it's like, and I'm just back there and I'm freaking out like, man, if all my Army buddies were here right now, they'd be like, no, you're bullshit. I don't believe you. I was stationed in Germany, not you, this kind of stuff. But dude, this guy had this box and he had buttons from the uniforms. He had a wedding ring, all kinds of cool stuff. So cool, we get this stuff, man, and it's like, all right, well, guys, let's start clearing ground, let's start getting it. We start breaking ground. They bring in these big old earth movers, they put them on these tarps, and we go through there with these screens, and we're screening dirt all day, every day. I mean, just going, finding 50 cal rounds, old school, like still inside the casing, some without the penetrators. And we started to find little objects that was what we call POR, possible osseous remains, bone. And going back to your story right there about the Massachusetts West, the one that I found was a little small piece. It was very small, the size of your knuckle. And, you're not supposed to do this, but if you put your tongue to bone, it sticks. So I was looking at it. It has all the osseons on the inside, the little circles you see inside the bone, all these little osseons. So I'm like, hey, I think I found something. They're like, okay, we'll put it in a bag. And there wasn't a lot of those little OPORs found. I think at most was 5 or 6 that we found. Well, during our dig, we find out using that ring that the individual who bought this ring, he bought this ring in Florida. And we're like, okay, so now this ring was bought in Florida. We go back, and this is kind of, I'm telling you this all kind of consolidated, but we're out there digging and we're finding these POR, we're finding pieces of the plane, finding 50 cal rounds, this, that, and the other thing. At the same time, the historians are also going back and looking at the ring, looking at the buttons, the fabrics, the type, the, when, where, who, that kind of stuff. And so what we found out at the end of our dig was that this person, whoever this person was originally from Monroe, Louisiana, had gone to Florida to do training prior to leaving to Germany. While he was there, he had gotten married. He had gone to a local pawn shop, a local area, and he bought that ring set there because we traced it back to that spot in Florida. And then he'd gone off to the war. He died. Like I said, I believe that it was I know it was December 1944, the date. I don't remember, 13th maybe. But in 1944, that's whenever he took his last breath. And that ring stayed with him. So that was in 2019. And then in the beginning of 2004, my buddy, who was in the Marines, it's also at the University of Wisconsin, he called me, and he called me Master Guns because I told him, like, hey, I was a Master Gun in the Army. He's a Marine, so he called me Master Guns. So he's like, hey, what's up, Master Guns? He's like, oh, nothing, just hanging out here at home. He goes, well, take a bow. Congratulations. You're officially a forensic archaeologist. And I'm just like, okay, man, what are you talking about? He's like, we have a positive ID on this individual, and the remains, they're going to go through the process, and we're going to bury him. That individual was eventually buried in Florida with, I guess, the surviving members of his family. So,
Oh my
yeah,
God, that is an incredible story.
yeah.
Was any idea the woman he married, had she already passed or is she still around or?
That part, I don't know, man. I don't know. But I can tell you this: while we were doing that, I mean, and like I said, we're just out there digging, and in the breaks, they would go off to go look at the big old cemeteries from the wars. I personally didn't want to do that because I walked through cemeteries, and uh, according to my own spirituality, rather than go and disturb people while they're resting, I'll wait for them to come and hang out with me. If I'm sitting in
Yeah.
the backyard and I'm, making a fire and I'm hanging out with my dogs, and all of a sudden a song comes on, I remember a friend. I'm like, hey, I remember that asshole. I'm gonna go get me a beer now and drink a beer or whatever for this guy. I remember that. And but it was cool because during that time I got to walk around Bastogne. It was during the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I mean, of the Battle of the Bulge. So it was really cool, kind of having that experience, being a tanker, going through this, seeing that countryside. I like to run, so I'd be running through there. It was a really cool experience. And then at the very end, many years later, to be told, hey, you found him, and now he's home with his family. That was like, okay, you know what? Cool.
That's absolutely incredible. I'm glad you were a part of that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I'm so glad they got him home,
Hmm.
after all these years.
Hmm.
That's just incredible.
And I
Wow.
think that, and I said this while I was an undergraduate, and I'll also even say it now, but I think I really would like to see more veterans go and educate themselves, and go into those kind of very specialized fields, because a lot of us, when it comes to that, like us being master gunners, when you talk about going and doing archaeology stuff, we're going to go out we're going to look at the range, look at the land, we're going to do our recon. Then we're going to start measuring distances. Here's going to be my first box that I'm going to start to do my first dig in. I want my team over
Yeah.
here, and and everything is so precise, so calculated. And I think that a lot of military people would be, because I kept on thinking that the whole time I was out there digging. I was like, I have so many friends that I know that they would give me the opportunity to go to school and study that. And hey, sorry for the summer, we're leaving. We're going back to Germany to go do some digs to bring guys home, or somewhere in Asia. I was like, I don't think anyone would be, pissed off about that.
No, no, that'd be an incredible experience, something that'd be amazing to be a part of.
Hmm.
I didn't know this until I went to the senior leaders course in probably 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. Um, I met a guy, he was infantry, and he had spent about 2 or 3 years on a detail, active duty, where him and several other active duty guys with some civilians were locating remains in Vietnam.
Hmm.
And, this is years and years after the war. And they were doing basically kind of like how that guy just kind of showed up with the box of memorabilia from this guy that had fallen. It was the same kind of thing. They're talking to people that were around during that time frame, looking for soldiers, and they found quite a few and brought them back. And I didn't know that we were still doing that, and I was so impressed. I was like,
Yeah.
"Man, you are lucky to have gotten that detail. That is a great job to
Yeah.
have." Wow.
Yeah. I had some buddies in Hawaii that got that gig. And
Mhm.
just real quick,
Yeah.
one of my professors at UH, he was the first, he was one, his story was he was one of the first Americans, about the first American to get to go into Vietnam to bring home, I'm sorry, not Vietnam, North Korea, to bring home people from North Korea.
No kidding.
We went to his house to have beers, and he had this flag, kind of like all the Army guys do, have the pins where you've been. And he had one in North Korea. And we were all talking about where we've been. And he's kind of came in and shows this little thing you only get from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And I was like, wow. All my cool
That's
guy
why.
drinking stories are out the story, man.
I mean, I saw North Korea with my own eyes, but I never went there.
Right. I saw them through my tank lenses. I was like, okay, cool, man. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. That is so cool.
Hmm.
Hey, we left your war service, but I kind of want to touch something real quick to see if from your tours, um, Did you carry anything that later turned into a PTSD diagnosis or anything like that? Did you carry anything, any mental scars, or did you make it out fairly unscathed?
No, man. Honestly, this is actually. I talked to a lot of people about that, man. So what I remember from the first time coming home was it was kind of like you went to the war, you saw some stuff, so you have PTSD. Fair enough. I got PTSD. I went to the war. You know, um, when I got out of the army, I was focused on doing the next thing, which was going to school. Just, you got to stay in the fight. So I'm, you know, but since then, no, actually, that's actually why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, because I kind of realized something that I think I personally feel that we've been lied to. We've been kind of pushed into this corner where we have to feel this way about that, you know? Because you're talking about growing up as a kid. When I was a kid growing up, so my mom's family, my mom's very deep in her history. Well, my mom's a mestiza, so she's half native and half Spaniard Portuguese. So we heard about how the Spaniards came over, intrepid explorers. They came through the flat earth and they landed and they, did what they did. So we hear about these conquistadores. And then she stopped and go, yeah, but then my family who was here in Veracruz, they were fighting them. And then my dad's side from Michoacan, they talk about how it's called the Mixton War. And that's when the Chichimeca fought the Spaniards in the middle of Mexico. And that was like a big war that the Chichimeca kind of like, they ended up winning with the Spanish had to pay their way into Mexico. And then the latest in my dad's family was that they fought on the side of Zapata during the revolution. And then when he was killed, they went to go fight from Villa. I grew up in the Comancheria, the homeland of Quanah Parker. So when I was a little boy, all I knew I wanted to do was be a warrior. Football was like, I'm going to go be a warrior in football because that's where I could go be a warrior. And when I'm not a warrior, I enjoyed going and working with my pigs and hanging out with the farmers because that was cool. When there's no war, go do that. And when I got out of the army, I was going and talking to a counselor, if you will. And we just kind of started talking. It wasn't anything like it wasn't prescribed for me, just something I was doing. But in those talks, it kind of started to kind of hit me that in school, what I was hearing in school and what was directed to me in school by the faculty, by the students, and just society in general. I was kind of like, I don't have a problem. I wanted to be a warrior. I did not know understand the magnitude of, like you said, of what would happen to my friends that would, but those stories I had heard from my dad who told me that one of the guys he grew up with was killed in Vietnam the same day they were burying him. They showed up to find the wife of the guy being buried and tell him, hey, your husband was killed. And like you said, here's what was left with him, give him a little Ziploc bags. Like this is what's left. So I was already exposed to that in stories that my dad had told me. So they kind of just hit me like, I don't have any problems. I want to be a boy, you know? I'm happy that I made it out because my thoughts are my friends who didn't make it out, not that I live for them, but I live and I get to tell their story. I get to talk about them, you know? I get to talk about them.
I like that. I like that. I think what I'm hearing is it's a mindset that you had already ingrained yourself in. And a warrior understands that warriors die. And, if a guy dies in battle to a warrior, that's honorable. That's that's a good death to a warrior. And armed with that mindset, it's almost like a shield to protect you from the trauma that a lot of guys weren't protected from, maybe. Am I kind of onto what you're getting at?